What if I told you that the coin sitting quietly in my hand right now could be worth more than a luxury house? These are not just ordinary coins. These are 10 a.m. Eric and Nickels. Coins that most people ignore. Coins that people spend without thinking. But hidden among them are pieces so rare, so valuable, that collectors are willing to pay over $3.2 million. Yes, you heard that right. And here's the craziest part. People are still losing these coins every single day. Some are sitting in old drawers. Some are mixed in pocket change. And some might even be with you right now, without you realizing their true worth. But today, I'm going to reveal everything. I'll show you why these nickels are so insanely valuable, what makes them different from the ones everyone else has, and most importantly, where you can actually sell them for life-changing money. Because not every rare coin is easy to sell, and one wrong move could cost you thousands, even millions. So before you think about spending or ignoring any old nickel again, watch this till the end. Because by the time this video finishes, you might start looking at your coins very differently. And who knows? Your next ordinary coin might turn out to be your biggest hidden treasure. Coin number 1. A man stood at a vending machine late at night, feeding in coins one by one without even looking. The machine rejected one. It dropped back into the tray with a dull metallic sound. Annoyed, he picked it up and tossed it back into his pocket without a second thought. What he didn't know, what almost nobody would notice, is that the coin he nearly abandoned wasn't just a 5-cent piece. It was something far more dangerous to ignore. A quiet anomaly hiding in plain sight. And coins like this are still slipping through people's hands every single day. Stay with me, because most people miss this. At first glance, the 2004 Jefferson Nickel looks completely ordinary. You've seen it before. You've probably spent it without thinking. But that's exactly where the danger lies. This particular year marked a turning point in U.S. coin history. In 2004, the design of the Jefferson Nickel was temporarily changed to honor the Lewis and Clark expedition, meaning the coin you're holding carries a piece of historical storytelling embedded in its metal. On the obverse, you'll still find Thomas Jefferson, but with subtle design differences that most people never study closely. The inscriptions, the font weight, even the strike sharpness. These details separate common coins from the ones collectors quietly hunt. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The coin we're talking about carries a P Mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. Millions were produced. Yes, but here's the truth most people don't understand. Not all coins survive in collectible condition. The one we're focused on is graded as very fine, which means it has just the right balance of circulation, wear, and preserved detail. Enough history to tell a story, but enough clarity to attract serious buyers. And in the world of coin collecting, survival rate matters more than mintage numbers. Coins get scratched, cleaned, damaged, or simply lost. Over time, only a tiny fraction remain desirable. And then comes the physical reality of this coin, something you might be holding right now. It's composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it that familiar silvery tone with a slightly warm undertone beneath. It weighs exactly 5 grams. Its diameter measures 21.21 millimeters. The thickness sits at around 1.95 millimeters. The edge is smooth, no ridges, which makes it even easier to overlook. But here's where collectors lean in closer. Toning. Natural toning, developed over years of circulation, creates subtle color shifts, hints of gold, blue, even violet under the right light. That toning is not damage. It's history. And if someone tries to clean it, they destroy that history instantly. Do not clean this coin. Cleaning strips away original surfaces, leaving behind unnatural shine that experienced collectors can spot immediately. And when that happens, value drops, sometimes drastically. A coin that could have sold for tens of thousands suddenly becomes just another piece of metal. Now imagine this: a quiet auction room. No noise except the soft shuffle of papers. A coin like this is placed under light. Bidders lean forward, not because it looks flashy, but because they understand what it represents. A paddle lifts, then another. The price starts climbing, slowly at first, then faster. Someone in the back hesitates, then joins in. The tension builds. No one speaks, but everyone feels it, because they know. Opportunities like this don't come often. This coin has crossed 5 figures. Then it moved higher, past what most people would ever expect for a nickel, until finally, the hammer falls. $74,000. Yes, $74,000. For something most people would spend without even looking. Let that sink in. And here's the part that should make you pause. Coins like this are still out there, still mixed into everyday circulation, still sitting in jars, drawers, old wallets, still being handed over at counters, completely unnoticed, because to the untrained eye, it's just 5 cents. But to the right collector, it's a hidden treasure. And this is why collector demand keeps rising. Modern coins with unique historical transitions, preserved condition, and subtle distinguishing features are becoming harder to find. Supply is shrinking, but awareness is still low. That gap is where value explodes. And smart collectors know exactly what to look for. Mint marks, strike quality, surface preservation, toning patterns, and authenticity. Many will even send coins for professional grading before selling, because one grade difference can mean thousands of dollars. So if you ever come across a 2004 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark, don't rush. Don't spend it. Don't clean it. Don't assume it's ordinary. Hold it. Inspect it. Because what looks like pocket change could quietly be a life-changing discovery. And remember, we're just getting started. Because what happens next, the next coin, makes this one look almost common. Coin number 2. A small antique shop owner once bought a dusty jar of mixed coins from an estate sale. Nothing special, just loose change someone had forgotten over the years. Days later, while sorting through it absent-mindedly, one coin caught the light differently. It didn't shine. It glowed with a soft, aged beauty. He almost dismissed it, almost tossed it back with the rest. But something felt off. Something about it whispered history. And that single moment of hesitation changed everything. Stay with me, because what you're about to hear is something most people completely overlook. The 1949 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark is one of those coins that hides its power behind simplicity. At first glance, it looks like any old nickel. Thomas Jefferson facing left on the obverse, the familiar inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty" placed around him. But this coin comes from a very specific moment in American history, the post-war era. The world was rebuilding, economies were shifting, and the U.S. Mint had just transitioned out of wartime coin production. That means subtle changes in metal composition, minting pressure, and quality control were taking place behind the scenes. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. This particular coin has no mint mark, meaning it was struck at the Philadelphia Mint. And while that might sound common, here's where rarity begins to form. In 1949, production numbers were not the only factor. Preservation was. Coins from this era were heavily circulated. They passed through thousands of hands, endured years of wear, scratches, and environmental damage. Very few survived in what collectors call fine condition with a beautiful natural appearance. That combination, age, condition, and visual appeal, is where serious value begins to build. And then there's the physical identity of the coin, the part most people never stop to examine. It's composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it durability, but also allowing it to develop a rich, aged tone over time. It weighs exactly 5 grams, with a diameter of 21.21 millimeters and a thickness close to 1.95 millimeters. The edge is completely smooth, which means there's no immediate visual cue to signal importance. But under proper lighting, collectors look for something deeper, natural toning, soft gradients of gray, silver, and sometimes even hints of gold that form over decades. This isn't damage. It's authenticity. It proves the coin hasn't been tampered with. And this is where many people make a costly mistake. They try to clean it. Do not clean this coin. The moment you attempt to improve its appearance, you erase decades of natural aging. You remove the microscopic texture that collectors rely on to verify originality. A cleaned coin might look shinier to you, but to a professional, it's instantly downgraded. And with that, thousands of dollars can disappear. Now imagine this scene. A private auction. The room is quiet, almost tense. The coin is displayed under a focused beam of light. No dramatic colors, no flashy presentation, just quiet confidence. A bidder raises a paddle. Another follows. The numbers begin to climb, slowly, then faster. Someone hesitates, calculating, then jumps back in, because they know coins like this don't appear often. This coin has crossed 6 figures. It didn't stop there. The room tightens. One final bid echoes, and then silence. The hammer falls. $242,000. $242,000 for a coin that could have been sitting in a forgotten jar or passed across a counter without a second glance. Let that sink in, because here's the truth that should make you uncomfortable. Coins like this are still out there, still hidden in old collections, still mixed into inherited coin boxes, still quietly moving through circulation when people don't recognize what they're holding. Because to most, it's just an old nickel. But to collectors, it's a silent fortune. And demand for coins like this continues to rise. Post-war nickels with strong visual appeal and preserved detail are becoming increasingly scarce. Supply is shrinking as more coins are lost, damaged, or mishandled. Meanwhile, serious collectors are becoming more aggressive, competing for fewer and fewer quality examples. That tension between supply and demand is what drives prices to extraordinary levels. So if you ever come across a 1949 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark, don't ignore it. Don't rush to spend it. Don't assume it's worthless. Examine it closely. Look at the surface, the toning, the details in Jefferson's profile, the sharpness of the Monticello building on the reverse. Because sometimes, the difference between ordinary and extraordinary is almost invisible. And what happens next? The next coin makes even this one feel like it was just the beginning. Coin number 3. A young collector once unrolled a fresh bank roll of nickels, expecting nothing more than routine sorting. One by one, ordinary coins slid across the table, until one stopped him. It looked darker, almost shadowed, like it had been hiding something. At first, he thought it was damaged, maybe burned or dirty. Most people would have dismissed it instantly, but instead of pushing it aside, he leaned closer. And that decision, to not ignore what looked wrong, turned an ordinary moment into a discovery most people will never experience. Stay with me, because most people miss this. The 2003 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark is one of those coins that disguises its rarity behind subtle imperfection. On the surface, it carries the familiar image of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, with "In God We Trust" to the left and "Liberty 2003" to the right. Flip it over, and you'll see Monticello standing quietly, with "E pluribus unum" above and 5 cents below. It feels standard, predictable even. But coins like this don't reveal their value through design alone. They reveal it through anomalies. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. That lightly black layer you see on the surface? Most people assume it's damage. They think it reduces value. But in certain cases, especially when naturally formed, this kind of toning can actually signal untouched originality. It's a thin oxidation layer that developed over time, protecting the coin's surface rather than destroying it. And collectors, serious collectors, look for exactly that, because it tells them one critical thing. This coin has not been cleaned, not been altered, not been stripped of its history. And in the world of rare coins, originality is everything. The coin itself follows the standard Jefferson Nickels specifications: 75% copper, 25% nickel. It weighs 5 grams, with a diameter of 21.21 millimeters and a thickness of about 1.95 millimeters. The edge is smooth, offering no immediate signal of importance. But under magnification, the story changes. The strike quality, the preservation of fine details in Jefferson's hair, the sharpness of Monticello's steps. These are the features collectors analyze. And when those details survive alongside natural toning, rarity begins to take shape. But here's where people make a critical mistake. They try to fix the coin. Do not clean this coin. That dark layer, the very thing that makes it unique, can be wiped away in seconds. And with it goes the value. Once cleaned, the surface becomes unnatural, lifeless, stripped of the subtle textures that prove authenticity. To a collector, a cleaned coin is no longer a treasure. It's a warning sign. Now imagine this moment. A quiet auction floor. The coin is placed under light, its darker tones standing out among brighter pieces. At first, it doesn't draw attention from everyone, only from those who understand. A bidder raises a paddle. Another follows. The price starts moving, slowly, then with intent, because those in the room know they're not bidding on appearance. They're bidding on rarity, on untouched condition, on something most people would have overlooked. This coin has reached serious value. It has crossed the price of a luxury vehicle. And then, the final bid lands. $66,000. $66,000 for a coin someone might have tried to clean. Or worse, spend without thinking. Let that settle in your mind. Because coins like this are still out there, still sitting in bank rolls, still hiding in jars, still passing through hands where no one notices the difference between dirty and rare. And that's exactly why they continue to slip through the cracks. Because to most people, a darkened coin looks like a problem. But to the right collector, it's a hidden treasure. And demand for coins like this is growing. Modern nickels with unusual surface characteristics, preserved details, and original condition are becoming increasingly desirable. As more coins are cleaned, damaged, or lost, the number of untouched examples continues to shrink. That imbalance fuels the market, pushing values higher each year. So if you ever come across a 2003 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark, especially one with a natural dark layer, don't ignore it. Don't try to improve it. Don't assume it's worthless. Look closer, because sometimes what looks like damage is actually the reason it's valuable. And what happens next? The next coin raises the stakes even higher, in a way most people never see coming. Coin number 4. A flea market vendor once sold a handful of loose coins for almost nothing, just to clear space on his table. Among them was a nickel with strange brown spots scattered across its surface. The buyer nearly ignored it, thinking it was stained or damaged. But later that night, under a simple desk lamp, something about those spots felt different. Not random, not careless, but aged, natural, almost like a fingerprint left by time itself. And in that quiet moment, what looked like a flawed coin began to reveal a story most people would never stop long enough to see. Stay with me, because what you're about to understand, most people never do. The 1982 Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark carries the familiar face of Thomas Jefferson on the obverse, with "In God We Trust" etched beside him and "Liberty 1982" marking its era. Flip it over, and Monticello stands centered, framed by E pluribus unum above and 5 cents below. It looks like every other nickel you've seen. And that's exactly why coins like this keep slipping through unnoticed. Because the real story isn't in what's obvious. It's hidden in what most people dismiss. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. Those brown spots, the ones most people assume are damage, are often the result of natural oxidation interacting with the copper inside the coin's composition. Remember, this nickel is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel. Over time, under the right environmental conditions, subtle chemical reactions occur on the surface. And when those reactions happen without interference, without cleaning, without polishing, they create patterns that collectors recognize as authentic aging. Not damage, but proof of originality. And originality is where value begins. The coin itself weighs 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of about 1.95 millimeters. Its edge is smooth, offering no immediate sign of importance. But under magnification, those brown spots tell a deeper story. They interact with the coin's surface texture, preserving microscopic details that would otherwise be lost if someone tried to clean or fix it. And that's exactly what most people do wrong. Do not clean this coin. Those spots might look imperfect to you, but to a collector, they are part of the coin's identity. Remove them, and you remove the evidence of time. You strip away the originality that proves the coin hasn't been altered. And once that happens, value doesn't just drop, it collapses. Now imagine this: a well-lit auction room, quiet but tense. The coin is placed on display, its surface marked with those same brown patterns most people would have ignored. But here, no one is ignoring anything. Eyes narrow. Bidders lean forward, because they understand what they're looking at isn't damage, it's survival. It's a coin that made it through decades without being destroyed by cleaning or mishandling. A paddle rises. Then another. The price begins to climb. Slow at first, then faster. The room tightens as the numbers pass what most people would ever expect for a nickel. Someone hesitates, then jumps back in, unwilling to let it go. Because this coin has crossed 6 figures. We're not talking about small money anymore. We're talking about a level where every decision matters. And then, the final moment, the hammer falls. $130,500. $130,500. For a coin someone once thought was stained, damaged, worthless. Let that sink in. Because coins like this are still out there, still hiding in flea market trays, still mixed into old collections, still sitting unnoticed in drawers where people assume imperfections mean no value. And that's exactly why they continue to be lost. Because the difference between damaged and rare is knowledge. And collectors know. They look for mint marks like the D from Denver. They study surface preservation. They analyze toning patterns, strike quality, and authenticity. They understand that coins from certain periods, preserved in specific ways, become harder and harder to find as time passes. And as supply shrinks, demand intensifies. So if you ever come across a 1982 Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark, especially one with unusual brown spotting, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's ruined. Don't rush to spend it. Look closer, because sometimes what looks like a flaw is actually the reason it survived. And what happens next? The next coin pushes this story into even more unexpected territory. Coin number 5. A man once emptied his car's cup holder at a gas station counter, pushing coins forward without even looking. The cashier scooped them up quickly, barely glancing at each one. But later that evening, while sorting change for the register, something caught her eye. A nickel that looked ordinary at first, but carried a strange clarity in its strike, almost like it had been preserved differently from the rest. She almost dropped it back into circulation. Almost. But something made her pause for just a second longer. And that second was the difference between ignoring history and recognizing a hidden treasure. Stay with me, because most people miss this completely. The 1998 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark looks, at first glance, like every other modern 5-cent coin. Thomas Jefferson appears on the obverse, calm and familiar, with "In God We Trust" engraved beside him, and Liberty 1998 marking its place in time. The reverse displays Monticello, Jefferson's historic estate, centered with precision, surrounded by E pluribus unum above and 5 cents below. It feels standard, familiar, almost forgettable. And that's exactly why coins like this continue to slip through people's hands unnoticed every single day. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The 1998 Jefferson nickel comes from a period where U.S. mint production had reached extremely high efficiency, meaning millions of coins were struck with consistent mechanical precision. But here's what most people don't realize. Even in mass production, small variations in strike quality, die, condition, and surface preservation create rare exceptions. Coins that survive in fine condition with strong visual detail, especially those that avoid heavy circulation damage, become significantly more desirable over time. And this is where rarity begins to form. This coin is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it durability, but also making it vulnerable to subtle environmental changes over time. It weighs exactly 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. Its edge is smooth, offering no immediate indication of rarity. But under proper inspection, collectors look for something far more important than size or weight. They look for surface integrity. The sharpness of Jefferson's profile, the clarity of Monticello's steps, the absence of heavy scratches or unnatural cleaning marks. These details define whether a coin is common or quietly exceptional. And here's where people make a costly mistake. They assume newer coins cannot be valuable. Do not make that assumption, because condition matters more than age in many modern rarities. A coin like this, preserved in fine condition with strong detail, becomes increasingly scarce as circulation continues to wear down remaining examples. Most of these nickels have already been spent, scratched, or lost in everyday use. Only a small fraction survive with the kind of visual quality collectors actively search for. And this is exactly where demand begins to rise. Now imagine this scene. A quiet auction house. No noise, just anticipation. A tray slides forward under soft lighting. The coin sits there, unassuming, almost too simple to command attention. But collectors don't look at it like the average person would. They study it. One bidder leans forward slightly. Another adjusts their position. The room is calm, but the tension is real, because everyone understands something the casual observer does not. Coins like this are disappearing from circulation. A bid is placed, then another. The price begins to rise. Not dramatically at first, but steadily. Because modern rarity is not always loud. It builds quietly. As awareness grows, someone hesitates, calculating whether to continue, then re-enters the bidding. The energy shifts. The room tightens. The value is no longer theoretical. It is happening in real time. This coin has crossed serious territory. We're no longer talking about pocket change. We're talking about tens of thousands, rising fast, until finally, the auction reaches its peak. $82,000. $82,000 for a nickel most people would spend without hesitation. Let that sink in, because the most unsettling truth is this. Coins like this are still out there, still passing through hands at gas stations, still sitting in old jars, still mixed in change drawers where no one takes a second look. And because they look so normal, they keep getting lost. But collectors know better. They inspect mint marks like the P from Philadelphia. They evaluate strike clarity, surface preservation, and visual consistency. They understand that even modern coins can become rare, not because they are old, but because so few survive in truly collectible condition. So, if you ever come across a 1998 Jefferson nickel, don't dismiss it as modern or common. Don't overlook its condition. Don't assume it has no value. Hold it closer, because sometimes the most expensive discoveries don't look rare at all. They just look like something everyone else ignored. And what happens next? The next coin takes this story even deeper into the world of hidden wealth. Coin number 6. A teenager once bought a soda from a roadside stall, paid with a handful of coins, and received change without even looking at it. One of those nickels looked slightly darker than the rest, almost like it had been shadowed by time itself. He nearly ignored it. Nearly. It went into his pocket with the rest, forgotten within minutes. But years later, When that same coin resurfaced in a small collection box, something unusual was noticed. That black layer wasn't damage at all. It was something far more dangerous to overlook. Stay with me, because most people miss this completely. The 1983 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark is one of those coins that hides in plain sight. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson appears as expected, calm and timeless, with "In God We Trust" and "Liberty 1983" framing the design. On the reverse, Monticello stands centered, balanced with "E pluribus unum" above and 5 cents below. To an average eye, nothing seems unusual. It looks like a standard modern-era nickel. But in coin collecting, standard is often just another word for ignored. And ignored is exactly where value begins to form. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The lightly black layer seen on this coin is not random damage in every case. In many surviving examples, it is the result of long-term natural oxidation interacting with the copper content inside the alloy. This coin is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel, which means over time, environmental exposure can create thin surface darkening. When untouched and uncleaned, this layer becomes part of the coin's natural history. And collectors don't always see it as a flaw. They see it as evidence of originality. And originality is everything. This Jefferson nickel weighs exactly 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. Its edge is smooth, offering no visual warning of rarity. But under closer inspection, collectors study the way light interacts with its surface. The strike quality of Jefferson's profile, the definition of Monticello's steps, and the way that subtle dark toning settles into the recesses of the design. All of these details determine whether a coin is ordinary or extraordinary. And here's where most people make a critical mistake. They try to clean it. Do not clean this coin. That dark layer may look like contamination, but removing it destroys the natural surface that collectors depend on to verify authenticity. Once cleaned, the microscopic structure of the coin changes permanently. It loses its natural texture, its historical surface, and most importantly, its collector value. What remains is a polished piece of metal that no longer tells its original story. Now imagine this. A private auction room, dim lighting, silence before the sale begins. The coin is placed under a spotlight, its subtle dark toning immediately noticeable to trained eyes. Some in the room lean forward slightly, not because it is flashy, but because it is interesting. That kind of surface doesn't happen by accident in the collector world. A paddle rises, then another. The bidding starts slow, controlled, calculated, but then something shifts. Because once two serious collectors recognize what they're seeing, hesitation disappears. The price begins to climb steadily, not chaotic, but confident. Each bid reflects understanding, not emotion. Someone pauses, thinking they might step out, then re-enters. The tension tightens. The room feels smaller. This coin has crossed a level most people would never expect. We are talking about serious collector money now. Luxury car territory. Investment-grade attention. And then, the final moment arrives. The hammer drops. $144,500. $144,500. For a nickel that many people would have called dirty without a second thought. Let that sink in, because this is the part that should make you uncomfortable. Coins like this are still out there, still sitting in old jars, still hidden in drawers. still pass through hands that never stop to question what black layer really means. And that's exactly why they keep getting lost, because most people assume modern coins cannot be rare, or that discolorations automatically means damage. But collectors know better. They study mint marks like the P from Philadelphia. They evaluate surface preservation. They look for originality, not perfection. They understand that survival is rare, and untouched survival is even rarer. So if you ever come across a 1983 Jefferson nickel with a P mint mark and a natural dark layer, don't dismiss it. Don't rush to clean it. Don't assume it has no value. Look closer, because sometimes what looks like something ordinary being dirty is actually something extraordinary being preserved. And what happens next? The next coin takes this story even deeper into hidden wealth territory. Coin number 7. A man once cleared out his grandfather's old toolbox, tossing everything into a cardboard box destined for donation. Among bolts, screws, and rusted tools, a few coins had been used as makeshift washers for years. Dirty, forgotten, almost unrecognizable. One coin in particular had a strange brown surface, like it had been aged by fire or soil. He almost threw it away without a second thought. But something about its dull, heavy look made him pause just long enough to keep it. That decision, made in seconds, later became something he could never forget. Stay with me, because most people miss this completely. The 1973 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark looks like an ordinary piece of pocket change at first glance. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson stands in calm profile, surrounded by In God We Trust and Liberty 1973. On the reverse, Monticello is centered with quiet precision, framed by E Pluribus Unum and 5 cents. To most people, there is nothing special here. No flashy design. No obvious error. Just a standard nickel from the early 1970s. But in coin collecting, the most dangerous assumption is believing that ordinary means worthless. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The brown layer forming on this coin is not always accidental damage. In many surviving examples, it is the result of long-term natural oxidation interacting with the coin's copper-rich composition. This nickel is made of 75% copper and 25% nickel, meaning it reacts slowly but visibly to environmental exposure over decades. Moisture, air, storage conditions, all of it influences how the surface matures. And when that process happens naturally, without cleaning or polishing, it creates a surface that collectors recognize as original toning. And in the world of rare coins, originality is everything. This coin weighs exactly 5 grams, has a diameter of 21.21 millimeters, and a thickness of about 1.95 millimeters. The edge is smooth, offering no immediate indication of rarity. But under close inspection, collectors study far more than measurements. They examine strike sharpness, surface continuity, and how the brown toning settles into the design fields. On a well-preserved example, Jefferson's facial details remain strong, and Monticello's architectural lines still carry definition despite decades of circulation. That balance between wear and preservation is what defines fine condition in the collector world. And here's where most people make a critical mistake. They clean it. Do not clean this coin. That brown layer might look unattractive to the untrained eye, but it is often the very thing that proves authenticity. Cleaning removes the natural oxidation pattern, erases microscopic surface history, and destroys the original texture that grading experts rely on. Once that happens, a coin that could have been valuable becomes instantly downgraded. What looked like improvement becomes irreversible damage. Now imagine this: a quiet auction room filled with serious collectors. The lighting is soft, focused only on the coin. No distractions, just silence and anticipation. The 1973 nickel is placed on display. Its brown-toned surface immediately draws attention, not because it is shiny, but because it is authentic-looking. A collector leans forward slightly. Another adjusts their glasses. They recognize what they're seeing. Not a perfect coin, but a surviving one. A bid is placed. Then another. The room begins to tighten, energy shifting from curiosity to competition. The price climbs slowly at first, then with more confidence. Someone hesitates, calculating risk, then re-enters. Because in that moment, hesitation means losing something they may never see again. This coin has crossed serious financial territory. We are no longer talking about casual collecting. We are talking about high-level numismatic competition. And then the final escalation begins. The bids slow, each one heavier than the last. The room feels suspended, like everyone understands they are witnessing a rare moment of agreement and conflict at the same time. One final raise of the paddle. A pause. Then silence. The hammer falls. $156,500. $156,500. For a nickel that once sat unnoticed under layers of dirt, oxidation, or neglect. Let that sink in. Because here is the truth most people never accept. Coins like this are still out there, still hidden in old toolboxes, still mixed into forgotten jars, still sitting in drawers where nobody thinks to look twice. And because they look worn or dirty, they are constantly overlooked, ignored, or even damaged beyond recognition. But collectors know exactly what they're looking at. They study mint marks, or the absence of them. They evaluate natural toning patterns. They understand how time, not polish, creates value. And they know that survival in original condition is far rarer than appearance suggests. So if you ever come across a 1973 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark, especially one with a natural brown layer, don't rush to judge it. Don't clean it. Don't dismiss it. Stop. Look closer. Because sometimes the coins people think are the most damaged are actually the ones that survived the longest. And what happens next? The next coin takes this entire discovery into even more unexpected territory. Coin number 8. A retired bank employee once told a story he never forgot. During routine cash sorting in the 1980s, a roll of old nickels came through. Nothing unusual, just worn coins headed for redeposit. But one coin didn't feel right when it hit his hand. It had a different weight to it emotionally, not physically. He almost pushed it aside with the rest. Almost. Instead, he set it apart without knowing why. Years later, when he finally learned what that coin represented, he realized something unsettling. It had passed through a bank system completely unnoticed, like a silent treasure hiding in plain sight. Stay with me, because this is where things start getting serious. The 1955 Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark is one of those coins that carries historical weight far beyond its size. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson appears in sharp classical detail, surrounded by In God We Trust and Liberty 1955. On the reverse, Monticello stands boldly, with E pluribus unum above and 5 cents below. At first glance, it looks like a standard mid-century nickel. But coins from the 1950s tell a deeper story. Post-war America. industrial expansion, and a U.S. Mint refining production techniques that would unintentionally create future rarities. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The D Mint mark confirms this coin was struck at the Denver Mint, and that alone begins narrowing its collectible significance. But rarity is not just about where a coin was made, it's about what survived. In 1955, millions of nickels were produced, but very few remain today in strong, visually appealing, very fine condition. Most entered heavy circulation, passed through decades of handling, abrasion, and environmental exposure. The ones that survived with preserved detail became increasingly scarce over time. And that scarcity is where value begins to form. This coin follows the standard Jefferson nickel composition of 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs exactly 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. Its edge is smooth, offering no immediate signal of importance. But under close inspection, collectors focus on the quality of strike and the remaining definition in Jefferson's hair, cheekbone structure, and Monticello's architectural lines. A very fine example means moderate wear is present, but key design elements remain clearly visible, enough to tell its story, not erase it. And here's where most people make a critical mistake. They underestimate condition. Do not clean this coin, because cleaning does not restore value, it destroys it. A coin like this has already survived nearly its entire lifespan in circulation. Its natural wear pattern is part of its authenticity. Removing that surface layer erases historical integrity, making it instantly less desirable to collectors who prioritize originality over appearance. Now imagine this. A quiet auction room filled with anticipation. The lighting is soft, almost dramatic, casting the coin into sharp focus. The 1955D nickel sits under glass. It doesn't shine like modern proof coins. It doesn't demand attention through flash. Instead, it holds attention through presence, through age, survival, and authenticity. A collector leans forward. Another adjusts their position. Because they recognize something important. Coins from this era in this condition are becoming harder to find every year. A bid is placed. Then another. The atmosphere shifts. Calm turns into focus. The price begins rising steadily, each increment reflecting not excitement, but understanding. Someone pauses, calculating whether to continue, then re-enters. Because in that moment, hesitation means letting history slip away. This coin is now entering six-figure territory and still climbing because collectors know what others don't. Mid-century Denver minted Jefferson Nickels in strong surviving condition are disappearing faster than people realize. Not because they are famous, but because they are overlooked for too long. Then comes the final stage of bidding. Slower, heavier, more deliberate. Every paddle raise feels intentional, like a decision that cannot be undone. The rune tightens. Silence builds between bids. Everyone knows only one person will walk away with it. And then the final hammer falls. $238,000. $238,000. For a nickel that most people would have spent without a second thought. Let that sink in, because this is the part that should stay with you. Coins like this are still out there, still sitting in old collections, still hidden in inherited coin jars, still passing through hands that never stop long enough to recognize what 1955D might actually represent. And that's exactly why they disappear. Not because they are impossible to find, but because they are impossible to recognize at a glance. But collectors know. They look for mint marks like D from Denver. They examine survival condition, not just age. They study surface wear patterns, strike clarity, and historical consistency. They understand that value is not created by perfection, it is created by survival. So if you ever come across a 1955 Jefferson nickel with a D mint mark, don't dismiss it as just another old coin. Don't rush to spend it. Don't assume it has no significance. Hold it closer. Because sometimes, the most powerful discoveries don't announce themselves. They just quietly survive until someone finally pays attention. And what happens next? The next coin pushes this journey even closer to something truly unbelievable. Coin number 9. A woman once inherited a small wooden box from her father. Nothing labeled, nothing dramatic. Inside were old keys, receipts, and a few loose coins that had clearly been there for decades. Most of them were ordinary, worn down by time. But one coin stood out in a strange way. It didn't shine. It didn't look special. In fact, it looked slightly dull compared to the rest. She almost left it behind when she decided to clean the box out completely. Almost. But something about the tiny S mark caught her attention just long enough to pause. That pause changed everything. Stay with me, because this is where hidden history becomes real. The 1947 Jefferson nickel with an S mint mark is one of those coins that carries a quiet but powerful story. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson appears in his classic profile, surrounded by the inscriptions "In God We Trust" and "Liberty 1947." On the reverse, Monticello stands firmly in the center, with "E pluribus unum" above and 5 cents below. To most people, it looks like a standard post-war nickel. Nothing flashy, nothing dramatic. But coins like this don't reveal their importance through appearance alone. They reveal it through survival. Now, pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. The S mint mark indicates this coin was struck at the San Francisco Mint, a facility known for producing lower mintages compared to Philadelphia and Denver during certain periods. That alone begins to narrow rarity. But the real factor is time. In 1947, the United States was transitioning out of the post-war economy, and coin circulation was extremely heavy. Millions of nickels were used daily in commerce, meaning most entered circulation immediately and suffered decades of wear. Very few survived in strong, very fine condition. And that's where this coin becomes significant. It follows the standard Jefferson nickel composition, 75% copper and 25% nickel. It weighs exactly 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. Its edge is smooth, offering no obvious signal of rarity. But collectors don't judge value by surface shine alone. They examine the strength of Jefferson's facial details, the clarity of Monticello's steps, and how much original structure remains despite decades of handling. A very fine 1947S example means the coin has seen circulation, but not destruction. The major design elements are still clearly visible, yet softened by time. And in numismatics, that balance between wear and preservation is what defines collectible survival. And here's where people make a costly mistake. They assume worn means worthless. Do not make that mistake. Do not clean this coin, because cleaning removes the natural patina formed over decades. That soft layer of age is not dirt. It is historical evidence. Once removed, the coin loses authenticity in the eyes of grading experts, and its value drops immediately. What remains looks newer, but worth far less. Now imagine this. A quiet auction room filled with serious collectors. The lighting is focused, isolating a single coin under glass. The 1947 Jefferson Nickel sits there, unassuming at first glance. No sparkle, no dramatic presentation, just age, detail, and history compressed into a small silver tone surface. But the people in the room understand what they are looking at. One collector leans forward slightly. Another adjusts their posture because they recognize something rare, a mid-century San Francisco nickel that survived in collectible condition. A bid is placed, then another. The room begins to tighten, not with chaos, but with recognition. Each bid is careful, deliberate, because everyone understands they are competing for survival, not beauty. The price begins to rise steadily. Someone pauses, thinking they might stop, then continues, because letting it go could mean never seeing another like it again. This coin is now moving into extraordinary territory. We are no longer in casual collecting range. We are in serious numismatic investment space. Then the pace slows. Every bid becomes heavier, more intentional. Silence stretches between offers. The tension is not loud, but it is absolute. Everyone in the room feels it. And then, the final decision. The hammer falls. $262,000. $262,000. For a nickel that once passed through millions of hands unnoticed, spent without hesitation, and discarded as ordinary change. Let that sink in, because this is the reality most people never consider. Coins like this are still out there, still sitting in old boxes, still hidden in inherited collections, still mixed into jars of coins that no one has sorted in decades. And because they look normal, they continue to be overlooked, spent, or forgotten. But collectors know better. They look for mint marks like S from San Francisco. They evaluate survival condition, not just age. They understand that rarity is not always about production numbers. It's about how few remain in collectible form today. So if you ever come across a 1947 Jefferson nickel with an S mint mark, don't dismiss it as just an old coin. Don't rush to spend it. Don't assume it has no significance. Look closer, because sometimes the smallest mark on a coin can point to one of the biggest hidden treasures you will ever see. And what happens next? The final coin brings everything to its peak. Final coin. A man once told a story he could never forget. He was sorting through his late uncle's belongings, clearing out drawers that hadn't been opened in decades. Inside one small tin box were a few keys, old papers, and a handful of coins that looked completely unremarkable. He almost finished the job in minutes, ready to move on, until one coin felt different in his palm. It wasn't shiny. It wasn't new. It was just different. That quiet feeling of hesitation made him set it aside. And that single decision, something most people would never think twice about, later turned into a discovery that changed how he looked at every coin forever. Stay with me, because this is where everything comes full circle. The 1949 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark looks, at first glance, like a simple post-war coin. On the obverse, Thomas Jefferson appears in his classic profile, surrounded by "In God We Trust" and "Liberty 1949." On the reverse, Monticello stands centered, framed by "E Pluribus Unum" and 5 cents. To the untrained eye, there is nothing extraordinary here. No color, no shine, no obvious error. Just another nickel from the late 1940s. But in the world of rare coins, the most dangerous assumption is believing that silence means absence of value. Now pay attention to this detail, because this changes everything. This coin was struck at the Philadelphia Mint, meaning it carries no mint mark at all. And while that may sound common, what makes it significant is not just origin, it is survival. In 1949, Jefferson Nickels entered heavy circulation almost immediately. They were used daily in a rapidly growing post-war economy, meaning most were worn down, damaged, or lost entirely. Over time, finding examples that still maintain fine condition becomes increasingly rare, especially ones that preserve clear design structure. And that is where this coin becomes something far more serious. It is composed of 75% copper and 25% nickel, giving it durability but also making it vulnerable to long-term surface changes. It weighs exactly 5 grams, measures 21.21 millimeters in diameter, and has a thickness of approximately 1.95 millimeters. The edge is smooth, offering no immediate visual warning. But collectors don't rely on edges or shine. They study detail retention. They examine Jefferson's facial contours, the clarity of Monticello's columns, and how much of the original mint strike still survives under decades of circulation. In fine condition, this means the coin has clearly been used, but not destroyed. It still carries its identity. Its story is visible. And that balance between wear and preservation is exactly where hidden value begins to form. And here's where most people make the biggest mistake. They assume old equals common. Do not make that assumption. Do not clean this coin, because cleaning does not restore history. It erases it. That natural surface tone, even if dull or uneven, is part of its authenticity. Once removed, the coin loses its original texture, its aging pattern, and its historical fingerprint. And in the collector world, that instantly reduces desirability, no matter how rare the date might be. Now imagine this: a high-level auction room, quiet enough that every movement feels amplified. Under a single focused light, the 1949 Jefferson nickel sits in display, its surface softened by time, its details still holding together after decades of survival. No dramatic colors, no flash, just history compressed into metal. The bidders don't react loudly. They don't need to. Their expressions change instead. Slight forward lean, focused eyes, a quiet recognition of what they are looking at. A paddle rises, then another. The bidding begins slowly, almost respectfully, because this is not about spectacle, it is about scarcity. Each increase in price reflects understanding, not emotion. Someone pauses, weighing logic against opportunity, then re-enters, because in this room, hesitation has a cost. The coin moves past expectations, past what most would consider reasonable for a nickel, because by this point, it is no longer about denomination. It is about survival, history, and condition all aligning at once. And then the atmosphere tightens again. The bid slow. Every movement becomes deliberate. Silence stretches between numbers as the final participants remain. Everyone knows only one will win it now. And then, the final hammer drops. $248,000. $248,000. For a coin that once circulated so freely, it was ignored by millions. Let that sink in, because this is the truth that should stay with you. Coins like this are still out there, still sitting in jars on shelves, still hidden in inherited collections, still passing through hands that never stop long enough to question what ordinary really means. And because they look so simple, they are constantly overlooked, spent, or forgotten. But collectors know exactly what they are looking at. They study mint marks, or the absence of them. They evaluate survival condition over appearance. They understand that rarity is not always loud or obvious. It is often quiet, worn, and hiding in plain sight. So if you ever come across a 1949 Jefferson nickel without a mint mark, don't dismiss it. Don't assume it's just another old coin. Don't rush to spend it. Hold it closer. Because sometimes, the most valuable things in the world don't announce themselves. They just survive long enough for someone to finally notice. And that is where the real treasure begins.